Hey everybody, Edo here, and at the start of this year I put out a video about what types of different content and different approaches folks would be interested in me doing on the channel. Things are feeling samey, wanted to do some things new, got lots of suggestions. One category of which was about like, hey Ed, you used to do videos where you reacted to things that were happening in the board game and Kickstarter space and in like a reasonably timely manner, same week, following week, gave some insight, perspective, that kind of thing on those types of events and sort of, you know, stories. And so, you know, I'm very interested in, you know, aligning and coming up with different ways of doing content. And so I was like, all right, I'll do it. And it just so happens that basically that same day or the next day, the Big Kid Games Sweet Mess situation occurred. And so there's actually a lot of interesting aspects to it, which I will talk about. Again, also, just if you haven't seen the video of me talking about the channel and looking for suggestions, please check it out. I'll link it or something. But I'm very interested in feedback there. So what is going on? Well, if you are sort of attuned to the Kickstarter community board game space right now, one of the things that's going on is an update that Jason Moghan, I don't know if that's how you pronounce his last name, Jason put out regarding the Sweet Mess Kickstarter and sort of what's going on, because it did over $100,000, people want their games, they've been waiting, when are we going to get their stuff? And this was a really long and interesting update, and so, and I'll link it. Let me start by saying, you know, I've actually met Jason. I've met him at a number of conventions. Whether or not they relate to what's in his update, I'm not sure. Dude's a tall, jolly guy, pleasant, nice attitude. You know, that's all I know from interacting with him. I've spoken with him a number of times. When I've passed by his booth, he said hello, you know, asked my opinions on stuff, which people often do. So, you know, I don't really know in depth his background, but, you know, yeah, like, I guess one of the things that would be noted is he's very gregarious. Like, he's somebody that you'd, you know, see and say, oh, hi, what's up? Anyway, so it took me a little bit to sort of pull apart what has happened, because I have not really been, I've played a couple, did I even play Montana? I don't know. But like, I haven't backed these Kickstarters, I haven't really been paying attention. But basically, what's interesting here is this is a case of a Kickstarter creator stringing together a number of Kickstarters that aren't yet fulfilled, that kind of string of Kickstarters, which we know is pretty frowned upon. But also, this one's interesting because actually it starts with a campaign called The Future of Big Kids Games, where he was actually signing 100 folks up to essentially, there was a period where they had these like, be supporter of a campaign or a business campaigns where you were just giving the company some money and you would be able to get a game of theirs a year for the next 5 years or whatever. They sort of lost favor pretty quickly, but there were some old campaigns that were of this nature. And I think it's actually an interesting point in this one, because basically, right, so basically, if you read the update, in essence, ran out of money, don't have what I need, gonna do it, I'm like not quitting, gonna fight for it, but by the way, here's all these things that expense, and I traveled, and I paid myself, and well, this other campaign failed, so that impacted this, and you know, explanation, therefore, working on it, gonna figure it out, you know, that kind of thing. And, you know, fires ensues, anger ensues, right? But what's sort of interesting about it all, in a weird way, is first, a really important point of this is from a backer perspective, when you're backing a Kickstarter, are you backing, and this comes up in lots of different ways, are you backing the game, the product, or are you backing the company, right? This comes up oftentimes when, you know, backers fight over retailers getting a product before Kickstarter backers do. And, you know, sort of, if you really want the company to be successful, you shouldn't care if you get your game second. Like, this is actually, backers will argue this and sort of position it as like, you're supporting this creator. You should want them to do as best as they can, and you should want the game to do as best as they can. This isn't, creators often use this argument. Creators often use the argument, but I've seen backers do it as well. And it's fascinating, really, because it's sort of an easy trap to fall into where, is a backer who's backing a Kickstarter project backing the company for the company's sake, for the success of the game, for the creator's sake? Or is it, no, I like this game, I would like this game, I'm backing it for this game? And I think part of it, there's been this evolution, growth, these companies that are using Kickstarter many times, they're not first-time creators anymore. I'm not a first-time creator. I didn't start with the spiel, but Pencil First Games has done a lot of Kickstarters. But they're not, that argument starts losing value when it's like, if it's this first person's game and they're trying to make it happen, it's one thing. But like when your company's making games on Kickstarters and using it for the benefit of Kickstarter backers to say, don't give me a hard time because I sold it at a convention before you got your copy. You should want me to be successful. Well, it's like, I sort of think I support the project. Okay, why did I go through that? Well, I think it is a completely different situation if you're like, hey, please support my company and my vision for my company, and you are helping us get started. You're paying for our website and rebranding, and like, we are asking you to support an indie creator. I think if you are being asked to support an indie creator in a company, that's what you're signing up for. You're like, oh no, I'm giving you this money to give you, this person, this chance to be successful. Good luck. And by the way, I expect my free games when you release them. And, I'm going to be pissed. Like, what's going to piss me off if you have games in the future and then I don't get my free copy of it, right? That's what's going to piss you off. So it's interesting in this case because it sort of started with that. That's what the original thing was. But then afterwards, there's just normal campaigns with normal expectations about making games. And as the campaigns progressed, whether it's Montana or Sweet Mess or whatever, these are different audiences. I think it's easy for the Facebook and board game community to like expect everyone to know about this. Like, to expect the average person to like know if somebody has a campaign or a previous campaign under a different name or this or that or what they're doing or if they haven't fulfilled yet. Like, that information is not easily accessible to you as a backer, right? Like, it is not something that you can quickly and easily find out about a creator. They don't have a star rating. They're starting to add like favorable signs on Kickstarter, but it's not like a marketplace. It's not like, oh, I'm on eBay or Amazon and I very clearly understand this group, this company. And yes, it's incumbent on somebody to like look into what they're investing in or putting money into. But at the same time, when Kickstarters are really just, check out this game, look at the game, a lot of that gets, and as campaigns reach out to more casual users and it's, the ubiquity of Kickstarter as a marketplace, that expectation that person should understand the risk and blah, 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 I think is a harder and harder argument. Not that you can't ultimately end there, but it starts becoming just like not a reasonable, it's like to some degree, it's like, well, you didn't read the terms of service? What, you hit the agree button and you didn't understand that they were collecting your data? Like, yeah, of course you can, but like at a practical level, who is? At a practical level, it's like, well, whatever. Okay, so back on track. So there was this feature, but these are normal campaigns, and then he has this update in the Sweet Mess, and there's some really interesting things that come here. One, just as a general idea, if you're tired, busy, stressed, like probably just as a general Kickstarter recommendation, don't write and send out your update, right? Like, if you're not, especially if you're like in a bad situation, right? If you're not sort of set up for success. You know, be aware of it. And I don't know if I've got something on my face. These beards now. Is it the beard? Or is it like a piece of something? I don't know. Anyway, you'll tell me or I'll find out after. So, you know, he goes through this in the beginning of his update, and you just start reading it, and it does sort of say, this is, you know, this might not be as centered as it needs to be. And so I just think, generally speaking, have somebody else review it. Send it the next day. Put it on hold. You know, like, man, just take the break to make sure it's in order. So that's like a general recommendation. I think that also another important thing to keep in mind is, right, like you really need to be sensitive and think through the reaction and perspective of your viewers, or backers, right? I think that people, if you feel or sound a little bit flippant or overjoyous or dismissive about something that's like sort of bad information, even if you're trying to be, I mean, kudos to Jason for, you know, taking the honesty route. But if you can't match and understand the sort of vibe of the room, you know, I think you oftentimes step into hot water. And so I think, you know, understanding that's really important, especially when you're writing challenging updates. So there's a couple concepts in here that I think are really interesting. So one he hits on has to do with this running Kickstarters and Kickstarters to fund Kickstarters to fund Kickstarters, and using money from one to the other, or building your business and going that way, or investing. I think that, you know, he talks about it as sort of common practice, and certainly it is reasonably common for a Kickstarter creator to have multiple Kickstarters. That does happen. Pencil First Games has had open Kickstarters. I've never gone more than, the most I've had is sort of like one that's in manufacturing or one that's in shipping, and then one that's new. I've never really gone deeper than that. But there are some companies that have gone deeper. Ultimately, I just want to split this idea apart a little bit. One is, hey, each one of these is risky, and by having a couple of them open, you're bringing on risk. And how are you going to ensure that you successfully deliver to your backers? And you can have that conversation, but still keep the money, the resources, the time all collapsed, like all kept within that project, right? Like there's a difference between saying, hey, you know, given that this project is completed and paid for and all set and is going through the ship on a boat, shipping out the backers process, the idea of opening up another one and sort of starting it off, because it takes a lot of time for these all things to roll out with board games, like is one piece of it, is like one conversation that people have different levels of comfort with. But the other is this idea of like taking money from one to pay for another, or using money to recoup, or essentially, your company finances being dependent upon Kickstarter revenue spikes that you're trying to sort of bleed and paper over holes and gaps in revenue, right? That's, I mean, and we could have the discussion about both. Boy, the one where you're doing that is super problematic, super dangerous, almost always results in catastrophe, and it really is terrible. And so I remember when Jamie Stegmaier shifted from Kickstarter to no longer doing Kickstarters, and there's like this sudden change in how money works, because usually you're like more money up front that you use to like pay forward, and then suddenly you're like, well, no, you're taking from like the risk equation from being a Kickstarter creator to just being a straight up publisher is very different. And I think that, I think backers have back to what I'm a little bit all over the place, but back to that original point, if a backer is backing a product, it is absolutely 100% rational for them to be like, I expect the money and things that's going towards this project to be paying for this project. And when you say, this is the money I need to fund this project, the money that you're getting is related to this project. Now, I'll get to the part about salaries and things like that in a second. But just this like idea that like, oh, you took money from this to pay for that. That was, I've been working in video games for a long time, but I worked for a company, Mind Control Software, a long time ago, independent game publisher, and it was this constant thing where you would be working on a project and the milestone schedule would be stuff that you'd get paid, and then you'd have all these gaps. And so, you'd work on a new project, and then you'd be using that money to like cover expenses because your cash flow wasn't consistent with your expenses. But that was with clients that were paying money, right? Like that was like a standard in and out of money. It's just that the cash flow required you to like use new money for old things. I think on a Kickstarter though, it's super problematic. And so for a creator, I just absolutely recommend understand your finances, understand your projects, bucket off that money so you know that like, yes, I have the money to do this. I got other stuff going on, but this money's here for this. I can complete, I can deliver. And I think that, it's challenging. It is not the case, in my opinion, that when you are backing a Kickstarter project, you are saying, that's to that earlier point, you are saying, oh, I'm just supporting the success of this company, and the byproduct of that is this product I'm going to get. That is not what you're looking at on the Kickstarter. You are saying, this game, I want this game, and I'm going to pay you this money to get this game. And I assume when you say you get this much funding, you will get me this game, right? Pretty straightforward. And, not charge me more later, unless it says in the campaign for shipping, whatever. But like the point is like that's the expectation. So let's set that aside. The next interesting one that comes up, and so we talked about that, whatever. And then, this thing lists all these expenses, where they are, how they're doing. Somebody was asking me why there's some line items that he summed up. I mean, typically, if I'm paying an artist some amount of money, I wouldn't list that in a public place because, if I tell you I paid these 10 people this full amount is different than me telling you what I paid each person. That's not personal information, I guess, but you don't typically share that. Anyway, but the point is, it goes through line after line. Here's the money in, here's the money out, where it was spent. Very, very showing that this is a fluid cash flow. It's basically his business account and where the money comes in and where it goes. So there isn't a line between the projects. It's sort of like, boy, maybe you should have shown this at the beginning and people knew what we were signing up for. But then you get to this really interesting thing, and it's actually probably what made me most interested in doing this video, because I think it's actually an interesting discussion. You go down, and then at the bottom, he lists CEO salary, and however much per year he paid himself, presumably. And a lot of people reacted very poorly to the idea of this guy getting paid money for the project, and that he should make money on the other side of the project, not in making the project. This isn't about lining his pockets, it's about making the game, and if the game brings success, blah, 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 blah. I think that's super interesting. Now, just to be clear, I don't make any money from the Kickstarters in that regard, right? Like a Kickstarter, generally speaking, is all of the money from the Kickstarter goes into the Kickstarter account. I don't get a salary from that. I don't even get a salary from Pencil First Games at all. But that's a whole other conversation. But like that I agree with the sentiment, at least, that money goes in there and comes out. And for me, it's the joy of the game and being able to make products and working with fantastic people. But I also have a full-time job, right? Like I'm not actually trying to pay a salary to myself I'm not trying to live off a Kickstarter. I use Kickstarters to make incredible projects with people that I want to, things that I think would be amazing to exist, and I find people who want it to exist, and we do it, right? But here's the thing. I don't know if the idea that a creator gets money is inherently wrong. I think like, because that's what made me think about it, right? Like I don't know, saying CEO and saying salary probably like could have been, you know, there's other ways to phrase it, but like when you come with a Kickstarter and you're like, we're going to make this game, I think as a backer, there's an assumption of expenses, and those expenses, and like again in this case, he goes off and he's done some conventions and some other stuff. I'm separate. I don't want to. This part of the conversation is not talking about big kid games. There's an expectation that this money is going to paying for the game. And what it ultimately typically pays for is it pays for the art, it pays for the graphic design, depending on the situation, it pays the designer, it pays the marketing companies, it pays all these groups money. And as a backer, you expect this money to be paid. I mean, like, there's no, like, I don't think there's any version where it's like this thing comes out of thin air, right? And I don't think backers are thinking they're just paying for the wood and the cardboard. Like, I think there is an expectation that you are paying the money it takes to make a game. And so what I think is interesting on this creator side is like, well, does it make sense that the person launching the product is the only person working on it? This is groups, but like that doesn't get paid for their time in the context of the project, right? Oh, I have you know, whatever, a game coming up. You know, you pay the artist, right? As an example, or the graphic designer. Okay, so we set aside some money, get a bunch of cards, whatever. Well, what if the creator's the artist? Are you saying, well, since you're the artist, your work doesn't have any value in that context, and so you should just hope for the success, and then you're not going to get paid for any of the work you do? Or you're the graphic designer, and that's true. Or you're the designer, so of course you shouldn't get anything. And I'm not saying in terms of profit, but in terms of the effort it took to make the game, right? Like, again, like really concrete examples, because like for like on the graphic design, I don't know, play testing or game development or something, right? You could hire an editor. You could hire a professional person to do the editing on your rule book and your game, and pay them hourly to do it. And the result of which would create a better product for your backers, right? And, you know, like let's say, you know, you're doing a game with an RPG book and you have an editor go through it, and that you pay that editor money. Well, there's this weird thing where it's like, well, if I pay that editor money, no, it would be as expected, or I could save the money from paying that person, do it myself, but suddenly then I'm not allowed to pay myself. It's interesting, right? Another example, fulfillment. I used to do all the fulfillment myself. Like there's a video where my entire place was boxes, right? And these are on some of these smaller campaigns, which I did, which did not have a lot of margin. Like there wasn't, you know, the games where you got just about as much as you needed, and not all of them, and or whatever, and like, you know, not paying, you know, not, you know, me shipping something doesn't cost anything if I don't charge anything, right? Like all it costs is the shipping and the paper. Whereas if I use a fulfillment company, it costs me $0.25 a package, or 50 cents, or $1, or whatever. And so it's just an interesting dynamic of like what expense is okay and not, right? Like if it's like, oh, you shouldn't use that service because you're just blowing money on it, but it's saving you time, but if you did that time, you wouldn't get paid for it. It's like, so I'm sort of rambling, but it's really interesting. It's really interesting, this dynamic of, if you're the creator, you shouldn't get any money unless it's a success and it's out there, right? Versus, no, like there are reasonable expectations that your costs of creating this thing will be covered. Your expenses to get it done, which could include your time as an individual. Some of this is in the weeds of, did the backers get the thing or not? right? Like, if the backers got the thing, I suspect most don't care. Like, I contributed the amount of money I expected. I got the thing I wanted on time. Great. I don't care what happened to the money. It's these cases where somebody hits a snag or a bump that it gets interesting. To the Sweet Mess thing, again, you're in a bind. There's a gap of money. The gap of money is listed as going to you. I do think that's like, a challenge. But I don't know, it's tough. And I know, I haven't followed the campaigns. People were saying there weren't updates. There weren't the type of things like, oh, if you're getting paid, what did you do? Like, I think that to me is specific to the situation, and I don't really want to like extract what, I think those are challenging situations, and sometimes people are fraudulent and criminals, and sometimes people just fuck up. Excuse the language. But just mess up. Just make bad decisions and learn, or don't learn, or continue to make bad decisions. And sometimes you're digging and you've dug yourself into a hole, and all you have is that shovel, and you just keep digging yourself deeper and deeper and deeper, right? Like that happens. So, I only know of Jason to the experience I had seeing and meeting the guy. And I haven't really been in these campaigns. Like, I can't speak to how the communication was, and not other than the response explosion around it. But I do think it's a good lesson into like maybe how not to write a Kickstarter update, or how to be thoughtful to, this business practice of rolling over, mushing together revenue can be challenging, and it really is worth having project by project budgets. Like, just every single game Pencil First Games has done has its own ongoing live project budget. Both because I think it's critical, but also because in some cases people, like a designer, might get royalties or back end, right? So like, I need to have it's like, this is this project, this is this project. So I know exactly the contributions within what was specific to them, and then how that works. And then I have a company budget which is totally separate from that. And so like, I think business practice wise, I think that's really valuable. The layering of Kickstarters and how they built, fit together is something you got to be very careful with. You got to know what you're doing. You have to have a track record, and I think it can be challenging. I don't think the expectation, coming out with pitchforks against backers who essentially know nothing about board games or the board game industry, and just saw a game they thought was cute and like either still hope to get it, or are just sort of like didn't know all the background stuff. Like, come on, some people don't have all that information. And then, this just the whole paying thing, I think, is interesting. It's so interesting. It's fascinating, that perception of time and money and value, and who does it and what's it worth, and whether or not you should get paid for it. Hey everybody, Edo here, and thanks for watching Gaming with Edo. Reviews over here on this playlist, League and Insider videos over here on this one. Subscribe, share, all that good stuff. But most importantly, play some great games. Thanks.